So I think throughout this class, we've addressed a lot of the ways that American culture has misrepresented Native American culture and just looking at it through one perspective and not seeing it as the many different levels that it is within different nations and different tribes and things like that. And honestly, a lot of the stuff that we've learned in this class has kind of shocked me too, just uh, listening to some of the different things about film and how Native Americans represented that, and um, how this issue hasn't just been going on um, since the creation of entertainment, but since America was founded by Christopher Columbus, and the fact that he didn't see Native Americans as human beings, but he saw them as a way to earn a profit and a way to get something from them by enslaving them. And I think to see how Native American cultures and how music is such a big aspect of that, and that as Americans, especially someone who is not and who does not have any type of Native American descent, I was so blind to deep deep and how music isn't just a surface level thing in Native American culture, but it's something that is so rooted into it. And because of American culture and how it's become so racially stimulated, not become, but has been, we only see what we want to see of Native American culture and what is perceived in movies. I mean, in my paper, obviously we had to talk about what singing red face is and the concept of that being um, sorry, but of that where I'm just trying to find my definition. I lost my place, but um, according to you in our book, the definition was it occurs when a non-native person takes on the racial archetype of Native American character through song. So basically, one of the best examples I found, besides the one in the book about Peter Pan and uh, of Peter Pan in the song like "What Makes the Red Man Red," I thought another really good example was Pocahontas, and that whole movie, the racial stereotypes in that movie of Native Americans just being savages. Um, but also, it's kind of funny how the song "Savages" in that movie it's not just sung by the Indians, but it's also sung by the colonists who are coming to colonize the land, and both of them are referring to each other as savages, whereas the colonists are calling the Indians barely even human, in that their whole race is like a disgusting curse. Their skin's a hellish red, giving these personas of Native Americans and painting this picture for these young children that are watching this to automatically presume that Native Americans all look like this and they're all savages and they all want to make sure that you don't take their land and all those kind of things. But in reality, the savages were the colonists, and I mean that's obvious. But also within the song, like "What Makes the Red Man Red" and "Savages," they create these beats that people think are common to Native American music, when in actuality they're nowhere to be found in Native American music, or the things like the different Native American calls they have during the songs too as well are not found within Native American culture. It's just what the entertainment industry created as the ideal uh, the ideal Native American, basically. And a lot of this stems from racial stereotyping of not just Native Americans, but also African Americans and blackface in certain acting and different things like that, where uh, African Americans couldn't even play their own roles. It was white males mainly playing these roles, and they were using over exaggerated uh, perceptions and portrayals of these men, and they were looking at the imaginary life of what it like the imagination. Oh, sorry, it's like the imaginary. It's an imaginary version of what it was like to live as a slave on a plantation, and this kind of or singing Redface is just the Native American version of blackface minstrelly. I don't know if I said that right, sorry. But to really understand like where all this is coming from, you have to like look at the different concepts that we had to mention throughout our paper, like racial antipathy, which is just basically strongly disliking a race because of, or just having strong feelings against a certain race or races, and certain like derogatory terms that like can come from that, like using the N word. I know when I was doing a little more research, I found like um, some different little nursery rhymes or songs. Like when I was growing up, I learned like 10 little monkeys jumping all in a bed. Like one fell off and bumped his head, and it goes so on, so on. But originally it was 10 little Negroes sitting on a fence. Oh, I forgot. It was something crazy, but I was just like mind blown that that's where one of the nursery rhymes that I grew up with originated from. And then it turned into 10 little 10 little Indians, and like so on and so on and so on. And like if you look more into that, like Agatha Christie, one of the most famous mystery writers, actually her book um, was named 10 little, I think I couldn't remember if it was 10 little Indians or 10 little Negroes at first. It was one or the other, but then they had to change it to, and then there were none, because of the implications that her title had. Also, like the term Indian giver. So usually, like the term giver has a great connotation. Like it's not a connotation that's perceived badly or anything like that. But when you add the word Indian, it's supposedly a negative connotation, or it becomes a negative connotation, not supposedly. It was based off that if you were, if an Indian Native American gives you something, then they expect something of equal value in return. And so I remember, I think my grandma one time was like, "Oh, you're an Indian giver because I didn't get my way, or I gave something to my brother, but I didn't get it back," or something like that. I don't know, but like it's a derogatory term that we have used throughout our culture, and there's no reason why that should be a thing whatsoever. I mean, basically, in my opinion, what they were doing was it's straight. Like, you give someone something, you should get something back. And I talked about another one of the terms, squaw, and its derogatory nation, and how this is the song, Your Squaw is on the Warpath, is a great example of singing Redface. Loretta Lynn sung the song in '68, and it talks basically about how some drunk Indian goes and tries to pick up some ladies, fails, comes home, and his wife is basically left to do everything, like take care of the home, the teepee, take care of it, their 6 papooses, and she finally like just gets so upset and so mad she goes on a warpath. Like she's coming after him with the tomahawk and different things like that, and just like perceiving again Native Americans as these angry people or drunken people. And I think it's so sad that someone who's not even a part of that culture has overstepped that line, and I'm trying to think of the right word here. I can't think of the right word, but that's not their story to tell. They're not a part of that culture, so they can't experience it. So it's for sure that seeing red face. It's for sure seeing red face because it's a non-Native American um, singing about their song. And this also, I think, goes into all the other terms we did talk about, like um, cultural misappropriation. I know in my classes, as an HR major, that we talk about cultural appropriation all the time. It's actually like probably one of the most talked about topics in my classes, and I decided to do a little extra research on different terminology for cultural appropriation and cultural misappropriation when I was writing this paper. And one of the best ones that I found was like basically it's a land of darkness, and usually it's where one culture, that is usually the the oppressed culture, uh, I mean the oppressing culture is taking something from another culture. So you see all the time nowadays how at a lot of like music festivals and raves and different things that that a lot of people actually dress up in Indian headdresses when they have nothing to do with Indian culture whatsoever. It's not theirs. They aren't a part of it. They just think it looks cool. When actuality, it's completely offensive. They haven't earned the right to wear that. They don't know the history behind it. I'm just assuming that they don't, but I'm sure most of them don't. And also with like stealing Native American design work, like using it for your own gain, not your own gain, but I mean like with like jewelry and fashion, different things like that, like using Native American um, looks and traditional dressings as inspiration for clothing lines and jewelry and different things like that. Like I know um, oh my gosh, I can't talk today. I'm so sorry. This is so awkward. But it also has to play into the idea of cultural confusion, where there's just so much misinformation out there about Native American culture that people don't. I think people get confused between truth or fiction and reality. Whereas they've heard something for so long growing up that, like, they see the Wild Wild West movies, they play Cowboys and Indians, and uh, you play like the Oregon Trail. Like that was something that was required for us to play when I was in. Oh, I forgot what grade we learned about all of that, but I remember like we we read a book, one of those like diary books that I forgot what it was called, but I just remembered it. But I just remember going through it, and like they were worried about like Indian scalping and all these different things. Then when we played the Oregon Trail, like you would get a notification or something that was like, "Oh, you just were attacked by a group of savage Indians." Like just further furthering that message of savage and not really looking at Native American culture or diving into that culture and really why some Native Americans were retaliating and why some of them or why some of the people on the Oregon Trail got attacked because they were on their land. They were on the Native Americans' land. It wasn't their land. It wasn't the people traveling on the Oregon Trail's land to take or be on. it wasn't even ours to take to begin with, but we did. Um, but like the only way to really change this type of confusion or misappropriation is to start over with our conversations about Native American culture. Like start completely clean, which honestly is entirely impossible in my personal opinion. Like if you've had something that's been rooted for so long, I mean, I don't think it's not impossible, but I don't think it would be something that I would see in my lifetime. And if I did, it would be towards the end because it would have to start with my generation changing this idea of Native Americans are all alike, all the same. They don't change. All they do is wear headbands and dance around a fire, you know? And I think that even music today does that. Like Tim McGraw's song Indian Outlaw and like Cher's Half Breed. Like, yes, Cher has a Cherokee heritage or a part of a Cherokee heritage, but she doesn't explain in her song or in her music video. You see like totem pole that's not typical to a Cherokee, um, typical to Cherokee culture. And I think through the movie that we watched, the oh my goodness, the engine. I'm so sorry, I literally just forgot the name. But I was really surprised. I guess I wasn't actually. That's a lie. I wasn't really surprised to see that um, that we portrayed Indians the way we did. But I guess that's just because that's what I grew up seeing. And I mean, I live with my grandma's during the summer, and I literally still watch her. I literally still see her watch like those old Western movies that have the Indians perceived that way. But that's because she just grew up with that. Um, and I think our pop culture and our entertainment industry thrives off of racial stereotyping. I know that sounds bad, but if you look at it, what would our industry be, or what would the entertainment industry be if it didn't have an underlying, if it didn't have some type of driving factor behind it, whether that be like stereotyping a race or um, a dramatic love story, or I don't know. I don't really know where I was going with that. I thought I had a point, but I guess I didn't. But I'm I'm trying to make sure that I'm not like missing something that I would want to talk about. I guess I also didn't realize that there was such a large amount of songs based off of that were racially stereotyping Native Americans. Like, um, then again, I guess until this class, I never really was exposed to Native American music. I'm from Houston, Texas, so I didn't really have a reason to be exposed to things like that. But oh, I didn't talk about empathetic or idealized sympathy. Sorry, idealized sympathy, where it's just like it's trying to think of the way I want to explain it. And idealized sympathy changes the topic from being, or it changes the perception in songs or in music, in popular music, from being this like savage warrior, like the song Savages, to more of uh, feeling sorry and trying to empathize with Native American struggles. So it's just interesting to see how, or like their plight and the journeys they had to go through on the Trail of Tears and different things like that when these people aren't Native American. So I just thought it was kind of interesting to see how there was that level to it. But I know I kind of rambled on, but that's basically what I thought. And I think the only way really to change this topic or to change singing red face or the lack of accurate representation of Native Americans in pop culture and music is to start having those conversations that need to happen, having those conversations with younger generations about how Native Americans aren't just what you see on the TVs or in the old westerns, or isn't just the singing and dancing around a fire, but there's actually cultures behind this, and there's actually different tribes and different nations and so many beautiful things that encompass it. And it's so sad that as Americans we're only choosing to see a one dimension of the Native American culture, when if it weren't for Native Americans we wouldn't even have a culture to begin with. And I think just raising more awareness and having more allies on your side is only going to make this an easier process. Now, as someone who's gone through this class, I really want to be an ally for this and make sure that if I ever hear anything that's incorrect or is a racialization, that I want to be the first to make sure that I correct that person or that statement. Because the only way to fix something is not to ignore it or to get upset about it, but it's to start having that open conversation and flow between another person when they say something that's inaccurate. Because sometimes that person might not even know because they haven't been exposed to that. But yeah, thanks.